Okay, hello everybody. I just wanted to make a quick video today regarding your presentations, and in my video, I'm going to show you two videos, and I'm also going to send you a paper that has useful phrases and language that you can use so that your presentation will be more effective. Okay, so I'm going to start with the short video, and I'm going to stop it time to time and make some comments, and then I'm going to show you the longer video. The first video is kind of general. It's only about 3 minutes long. It's just about academic presentation language, things that you can say when you're describing, things that are on the slides or transitions between the slides when you introduce a new topic and so forth. And the second presentation is more about the slide itself, okay? So it's more about design features and how you can use your slides more effectively. So let's get started. We'll go right into the first video.
The words you choose to use in your presentations convey your tone, attitude, and purpose. In this case, you're presenting for an academic and professional audience, and your word choice should match this. There are a few simple points to remember here. First, avoid saying, "I will tell you something about." Be more specific. Tell the audience exactly what you plan on doing.
Okay, so this is very, very important here. Okay, he's going to give you some other words, okay, instead of just saying, hello everybody, welcome to my presentation, all the introduction stuff, and when you come to the signposting, okay, you want to use something more than "I will tell you about," or "I will tell you something about Canada," for example. So look here.
Will you be explaining, describing, outlining, convincing, examining, investigating, informing, etc.?
Okay, these are amazing words, okay? So today, I would like to explain to you, okay, the government system in Canada, or I would like to describe some facts to you, even outline, okay? Outline is a great word, okay? Just to give you a quick frame, okay? I don't know about convince, but today, I will examine the effects, or I will investigate the effects of something, or I would just like to inform you about something, okay? So these are other words that you can use instead of just tell.
The list is endless. While your goal is to keep your talk accessible, you should still carefully consider your word choice and try to integrate academic alternatives where you can. This does not mean finding the most obscure words that no one will understand, but using words from the academic word list. Here are some good examples of simple and informal words. To buy, to get, a lot of, thing, good, bad, like.
Okay, so these words here are just very typical, everyday English words, okay? When you make your presentation, or before you make the presentation, when you're actually just preparing the presentation, don't be afraid to put these words in, but then substitute them with better words, okay? Have a look here.
Each of these also has numerous academic alternatives that are much more concise and nuanced in their meaning.
Okay, look at this.
Once again, context is important to know which academic synonym would be best to use. But some examples for these usual suspects are purchase and acquire.
Okay, so you can use this in your presentation when you talk about the materials, okay? So you don't want to say "we bought minuli chas," okay? But "we purchased" or "we acquired," okay? Acquire is also like zscat, like obtain. You can use these words, okay, in your scientific writing, okay? Any research article, okay? You need to talk about the, the companies, or you talk about materials and elements, or all kinds of stuff that you, even microscopes or equipment, okay? So you can say the microscope was purchased from Merck, or it was purchased from an Austrian company, or if it wasn't purchased, okay, somebody gave it to us, or we just got it from somewhere, then you can say it was acquired. It was acquired. Okay, so just put a D on it. Look at the next one here.
Obtain, achieve, receive, to mention just a few.
You know, get is such a universal word, and it's not too bad in a presentation. We got our results, but even better is we obtained our results, okay? And this is also získat. Achieve, okay, to dokázat, okay, or to dosiahnuť, okay, dosiahnuť, to reach something. So we achieved our goals, okay? We achieved our objective, okay? Here, we received is somebody or gave something to us. So we didn't receive our results, but we received our data, okay? Somebody gave data to us, okay? Another researcher, another research institution, a university, somebody, you know, gave us our data. So we received our data, or we received our statistics.
For to get, we see quite a lot of, which should be replaced with substantial, numerous, many, and so on.
Okay.
Think.
Great words. Dostatočný, substantial. Numerous, okay. There are numerous ways, okay. This is more countable, počitatelné, okay. Many is, of course, countable. Much is uncountable. It's not there, but, you know, okay. And if you're talking about things like a vec or položka, use these words. Like there are many aspects, points, issue. Issue is a problematika, advantage or disadvantage, and so on, okay. Item is a položka.
Thing could really mean anything. Thing could mean aspect, point, issue, advantage. The options here are almost endless. The same holds true for good and bad, which could refer to something positive or negative, strong or weak, or advantageous or disadvantageous.
Yeah, so when I look at, when the professors or even other PhD students send me work just to check, okay, so I see these words like good and bad, you know, like it sounds very basic to me, okay, so for university level, change these words into something stronger, okay, like positive results. Okay, so we don't want to say we got good results, okay, or our results were bad, but rather they were positive or negative, okay. I also see like a good correlation, okay, you know, when something is correlated, okay, or corresponds, a strong correspondence, or weak correlation or weak correspondence, okay? Something corresponds weakly or strongly, like an adverb. Advantageous, disadvantageous, okay? Able, poor. This is a great word, okay? For bad, I like to see that poor, okay? So the conditions were poor. You know, bad conditions, zlé podmienky, but better than is poor conditions, or the weather was poor, the lighting was poor, okay? So when you want to talk about something that that just wasn't suitable, okay, substitute it with poor.
And so on. And finally, such as, for example, and for instance, are better alternatives to use than like.
Yeah, okay. You can use like, that's great, but if you use it too many times, it becomes repetitive, okay? So if you have an example, say for example, or such as, okay, Or for instance, you can alternate strieddat between these two phrases. For example, or for instance, they both mean the same thing.
You should also avoid using like as a filler. It is important to use audience engaging language throughout your presentation to keep the presentation personal. For example, you could say, if I can draw your attention to, when you would like to point something out on the screen, or let's move on to,
Right.
when starting a new point.
Right.
You can draw on their previous language with, as you may know, or show your awareness that what you have described may raise some questions. At this point, you may be wondering why.
Great way,
however,
to, between slides.
And say, you guys. This is generally inappropriate.
Okay, so don't say you guys. I say you guys, but I'm not really making a presentation. This is more informal lectures, okay? But when you do make a presentation, don't say hi guys or look here guys or anything like that, In fact, don't even use the word. You can just say, I'd like to draw your attention to this slide or to this point or to this table and so on. You also want to be careful about contractions, okay? Contractions are with the apostrophe, okay? It, like it's, it is, it's, or we are, we're, and so on. I'll let the man describe it to you here.
While you are speaking, it is better to join some words together because that sounds the most natural.
Yeah.
Like I'm and you're. Articulating I and am separately just sounds strange. However,
it's a very bad translation down here.
When you write it on a PowerPoint slide, be sure to write it out in full. This is much more professional. To conclude, carefully consider your language when preparing your presentation. Be sure to integrate audience-engaging language, but remain professional.
Okay, so the second part of today's lecture, I'm just going to show you excerpts of a video by, I think her name is Susan McConnell, and she describes how to use your slides effectively. Let's have a look here. I'm not going to show all of it. It's a 42-minute video. I'll only show you some of the most important parts, the things that I think that you need to know that are most important for your presentation. Hang on there.
That's what I wanted to tell you about PowerPoint. I hope that's helpful. And now we want to transition into thinking more broadly about how to structure a talk so that its organization is clear to the audience. And I think about it as almost taking someone by the hand and walking them through the science, right? And saying, here's what I want you to see now, and here's the path that we're following. Here's where we've just been, and here's where we're going. So a good talk is like a good paper. It has a structure, right? A good talk starts out with a big question, and then we build content over time. We go through the meat of the talk, and then we end with a conclusion that basically reaches back out to the big issues that we started. Same way as we write a paper. Why are we so bad at actually doing this at talks? Well, if we discipline ourselves to do it, I think we can do it better. I'd like to show you an example from one of my own seminars of how I actually structure an introduction to define the really big question and then give enough background information to enable the audience to be able to follow the meat of the talk in the middle. And as I'm doing that, I also want to show you a trick that I've learned that I think is extraordinarily effective at giving good talks. And that's an idea that I call something like a home slide or a home image. It's a picture, maybe a cartoon, an image of some sort, that is going to signal to the audience that you're at a point in the talk where you're going to make a transition. It's a little signal to the audience to perk up because you're going to tell them where you've just been, what it means, and where you're going next. So as I show you the introduction to one of my talks, I'm going to build up into a home slide that you'll see a little bit later is going to come up again and again and again at transitions.
Okay, so this is really important here, okay? Have that home slide. Okay, watch what she does here. She's going to build up to it. She forms this image, and then the image is used repeatedly. not on every slide, but maybe on every slide. It's up to you really, but it's going to, constantly, it's going to drive your message to the audience members so that it's impossible for them to forget it, or it's impossible for them to not learn. Have a look here.
You might feel a little bit jarred because now the background of the slide is going to change from white to black, and this jarred feeling that you might experience is one of the reasons that I think it's actually quite important in a talk to keep the same color background throughout the entire thing. So here we go. So here's the first slide from my standard seminar, and notice first of all that my name and institution appear right here. Why is that? Well, because people in the audience may be taking notes and they might want to write down your name and they'll want to know how to spell it correctly. So it's a courtesy to them. So as I start in my talk, I start to discuss a kind of analogy between the brain, which is what we study, and a computer chip, because each of them has to make really specific connections with one another. The brain during development and the computer chip in a factory. And I make kind of a joke and see if people laugh and gauge the humor level of my audience at that point. And then I show the audience the cells that actually work on the actual circuitry of the brain that my lab studies in the cerebral cortex. And then I frame the major question that my lab is interested in, which really has to do with the question of how it is that these individual neurons in the brain know what kind of connections to form. What are the molecular mechanisms that guide those choices about cell fate and connectivity? At this point then, I introduce the two cell types that the talk will focus on, two sets of neurons that you'll see have different colors, and then I introduce two questions that the talk will address during the course of the next, however long it is, maybe a 45-minute seminar. One question having to do with the fate of the yellow cells, and another question having to do with the fate of the blue cells. And that basically then launches me into the actual data part of the talk. This particular image right here is the home image, or the home slide that I was referring to just a minute ago. And as you'll see, this image is going to reappear again and again and again in my talk during transitions. And we'll see just in a couple of minutes how that can get played out and how it can be extraordinarily effective in enabling the audience to follow a talk. Okay, so now we've built up an introduction and we're ready for the middle, right? So we're ready for the middle of the talk, which is the meat. But there's a problem. And that is that audiences have fairly limited attention spans. This is an interesting graph. So let's look at a little bit of data. This is a plot of that section.
Okay, sorry about that.
You see this home image and you see...
Yeah, sorry about that. She was just talking about attention span and things like that, but you don't need to know that. So anyways, back to that, that home image, okay, that home slide.
See the two questions. We're halfway through the talk, but I'm summarizing part one and getting ready to introduce the second set of questions. At this point then, I now start to explain that as we focus on the blue cells, that we're going to be looking at the role of a separate protein that is actually expressed in a subset of neurons within the different layers. And then I explain that we've generated knockout mice in which we've inserted a reporter into the cells that normally express this protein so that we can see their axonal connections. And now we don't really need to focus on the data, but look, there's a sentence at the top that basically says what I just told you. Then we see a simple figure from the controls in which I would point out that what I want the audience to look at are the blue axons that label the connections between the two hemispheres. That's in the control. And then we look at the mutant. The thing I'm going to emphasize is the absence of those connections here. Now we're going to look at it from the side. Same stuff. Sentence, two simple images. Words will match the content. Were I really delivering the seminar to you? And then I tell you what I just told you. I just told you that the blue cells express this protein, that they form this type of connection. And then I say, in the first part of the talk, I told you about another pathway. So you might be wondering, what is the relationship between these two pathways? So then I will go on to actually test that connection by presenting more data that would then build up into a small conclusion slide showing you that this protein represses the expression of this gene. So, simple graphics that really emphasize the bottom line, the story that I'm telling you with the minimum essential data. Okay, so we've gone through the...
Okay, so I think you can get the idea that she's using an image. It started or she showed the image right from the beginning of of her presentation, and she's constantly inserting that image. Okay, not on every slide, but you can put it on every slide if you want. You can put it even on a small corner or something like that. But it's always there, so that you always get that the idea of the presentation. It could be her conclusion, it can be her final result. Okay, but it's constantly demonstrating to the audience what she wants to talk about precisely. Anyways, I'm going to move to the last bit of her presentation, and this is her conclusion. Have a look at this.
That you introduced at the very first part of the talk. So again, here's how I would do it in my talk, just as a visual example of how one might think about this. Concluding up now, sentence at the top, the same diagram that you've seen before about this repression, and now adding other things. You haven't seen the data, but I would add that just to remind them that at least one of these mechanisms works through the modulation of chromatin. They would have seen that slide already. I would then connect it back to the first part of the talk and talk about a little switch that had gotten set up. I would then refer back even earlier to a part of the talk that you didn't see. Now going back to the really big picture, questions about how different types of neurons emerge over time. Many of these questions are still unanswered.
Okay, well, I'll leave it at that, though, okay? But I think you get the general idea. Always try to keep an image, or if it's not an image, you can have the sentence, somewhere up there. Sometimes it's a mathematical formula, something that needs to just repeat constantly. Okay, so I'd like to go through some of the signposting techniques that I'm sending to you in the attachment today, okay? Have a look at some of this stuff here. Okay, so when you get into the middle or the main part of your presentation, okay, we know how to open the presentation, we know about our rhetorical questions, our anecdotes, our stories, etc. But once you get, into the groove, once you start talking and talking and talking, well, you want to have like a smoothness, okay, smooth, something hodvábny, Abito šlo po masle, okay, ako po masle. Okay, so let's have a look here. So when you want to talk about what's coming, okay, in this part of my presentation, I'd like to talk about, let me first give you a brief overview, okay, of next generation sequencing, for example, or the Western blot, anything like that, just to give you that information. When you come to the end of a section, this brings me to the end of my first point. So much for point 2. I would avoid that one, okay? But here, so that's the background, okay? The pozadie, or the history of something. I wouldn't say this one. That's all I wanted to say about, okay? Because most of the time you want to talk endlessly. It's a presentation. When you summarize a point, before I move on, I'd like to recap the main points, okay? Recapitulate, okay, means that you want to repeat and you want to briefly tell the audience what you just spoke about. So let me briefly summarize the main issues. I'd like to summarize what I've said so far. And when you move to the next point, well, this leads directly to my next point, and click, go on to the next slide. This brings me to the next question. Click to the next slide. Let's now move on to, the topic of so-and-so, okay, and click to the next slide. So when you have visuals, okay, there's some gray words here, okay. So I can even talk about the chart on the following slide, or the chart on this slide, if you're already there, shows, you can change that to the graph, the pie chart, okay, the table, okay. All of these words here are perfect, okay, when you explain or when you're describing to the audience what they're looking at on each slide, okay. Anyways, I'm sending you all of this. Have a look at it, and And it's up to you. You choose the language that you are comfortable with and that you think is suitable for your presentation. Okay, so thank you very much for watching today's presentation. I hope everybody is doing well. I've received already 3 or 4 presentations, and I have to admit that they're wonderful. You guys are doing amazing. Keep up the great work. I mean, filming yourself actually is a great way to see yourself. It's actually great practice. When I watch these videos that I make for you guys, I can see all the little mistakes that I make. My voice, my pauses, So filming myself is a great way to keep in mind the nadostat key, all the things that are lacking, and I can see all the areas that I need to improve. So great, keep up the great work. So I think you've got about 1 more week before you hand everything in. April 30th is the deadline. And after that, I'm going to send you the questions and the feedback form. And so we should be able to wrap up our course, sometime during the middle of May. So sometime after the 2nd, we have 2 long weekends. Don't forget that. So after the 2nd long weekend, we'll try to wrap it up. And that would be the end of the course. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. And tune in next time. Bye-bye.